A stranger read my father's safe deposit box out loud, and item 9 was my house. He read it the way you would read a grocery list. 1 warranty deed. The grantor, a man named Harold. The grantee, his son. Dated the 12th of May, 2009. My name is Dean. I lived upstairs in that 2-family house for 20 years, and my father lived downstairs until the year he died. That deed had been signed in front of a notary, stamped with her seal, and locked inside a bank vault for 7 years. 3 lawyers would tell me it was worth nothing. The estate's lawyer needed 1 sentence. A deed that was never delivered, never transferred anything, and a deed sitting in the grantor's own box was never delivered. So the house passed under a will he signed in 2012, 3 years after the deed, and it went to his second wife instead of to me. I had 30 days to leave the only home I had ever had. A room above a hardware store for $700 a month, and a storage unit for the rest. But there was a line further down that inventory nobody in the room cared about except me, my father's checkbook register, and in it 2 checks written to the same notary. They were 21 days apart in the spring of 2009, 2 payments to the same woman, and only 1 deed had ever come out of that box. A man who could not spare 40 to record a deed had paid a notary twice in 1 month. It took me 9 years to make that arithmetic mean anything. You probably think a deed is the house. I did. I thought the paper was the thing, and whoever was holding it was holding the property. Every lawyer I could afford told me the same 3 things, and I have since learned that all 3 of them were true. First, that recording a deed is not what makes you an owner. Recording protects you from somebody who buys the place later without knowing you exist. Second, that a deed does nothing until it is delivered, and delivery is not an envelope or a handshake. It is the moment the grantor gives up the power to take it back. Third, that when a deed turns up in the grantor's own vault, on his own key, the law presumes he never let go of it. That presumption ran against me. Every one of those sentences was correct. It took me 9 years to understand that all 3 of them were about the wrong piece of paper. In the spring of 2009, my father was 71. He still owed about $41,000 on that house, and he was never going to finish paying it. He called me down to his kitchen, and there was a woman at the table with a stamp and a bound book, writing in it while he signed his name. He told me it was done, the house was mine, and the paper would live in the box at the bank. He gave me a key that afternoon. I never opened it. It was not my box, only my key, and I did not want to be a son who checked. He had buried my mother 5 months before he signed that deed, and he had stopped believing 1 copy of anything was enough. 9 years later, I was still paying $84 a month to store a dead man's furniture, and I started looking for the woman with the book. Her seal was on the void deed, and a notary's commission is a public record. She was 81 years old, and she still had every journal she had ever filled. The state had told her to keep them for 10 years. She kept them for 30, in a plastic bin in her garage, because she did not trust her own memory. Entry 1148 was my father signing the deed everybody had spent 9 years fighting about, and entry 1161, 21 days later, was my father signing a second one. The same house, the same son, the same kitchen table, and, in the remarks column, in her handwriting, 4 words, mailed by notary to grantee. A second deed had left that kitchen and gone into the United States mail, addressed to me, in June of 2009. This is the part where the 3 correct answers stopped being about my case. The paper in that vault was never the operative document, and it never had been. My father had done what a careful man does when he does not trust a single copy of anything. He made 2, he kept 1, and he sent 1 away. And both of them were originals. Not a photocopy and not a duplicate of anything, but 2 deeds signed the same way on 2 different days, which is why the one in the mail could do the entire job by itself. Delivery is a question of intent, and the court will read a man's intent out of what he actually did. He handed a deed to a 3rd person and told her to send it to his son. Under the same rule those lawyers have been quoting at me, a deed put into the mail for the grantee, at the grantor's own direction, is delivered. He had let go of it. Delivered when it was dropped, not when it was opened, not when it was recorded, and not when anybody finally went looking for it. Which means my father stopped owning that house in June of 2009. He could not leave it to anybody in 2012 because by then it was not his to leave. And his second wife had not bought anything. She took under a will, and the recording law protects buyers. It has never protected people who inherit. There was a young couple living in my rooms by then, paying her more every month than I was paying for a room above a shop. I used to drive past the house on purpose, which I do not recommend. I brought that journal to a lawyer who took the case, and she told me inside an hour that a line in a notebook was not going to be enough. A notary's book proves a signing happened. It does not prove what anybody did with the paper afterward, and a remarks column is not sworn testimony. The other side's answer ran 2 pages, and it never argued about the second deed at all. It argued that a document nobody could produce did not exist. They were not wrong to try it. I had a stranger's handwriting and no deed, and I had never once seen that envelope in my life. Then they made the move that almost ended it. They offered me $18,000 to sign a release and go away, and my own lawyer told me to think about it seriously. I had about $600 in the bank and a storage bill that never stopped. I sat in a parking lot with that letter for an hour, and I have never been closer to signing anything. The woman who kept the book was 81 years old. She remembered that kitchen and she remembered my father, and she would not say she remembered mailing anything. She was on that stand for 19 minutes. She would not guess, she would not round, and she corrected their lawyer twice about a year. It was the least helpful and most believable thing I have ever watched. What she did say was that she wrote down what happened when it happened because 30 years of Tuesdays run together. That was the strongest thing I had, and it was still not a deed. So I went looking for a piece of paper that had been mailed to an address I was living at in a year I could barely stand to think about. My mother had been dead 5 months when that envelope was mailed. I know now that I did not open mail that year, stacked it. It went into a box, and the box went onto a closet shelf. And in 2016, a man with a dolly moved every box I owned into a unit out on the county road. I had been paying $84 a month for 9 years to keep something I never looked at. Over 9 years, that is $9,072 spent storing a deed that was worth a house. I want to be honest about this part because it did not feel like a victory. It took 2 nights and 41 boxes, and I very nearly did not find it. It was in a shoebox with a phone bill and 2 sympathy cards, a business envelope with a notary's return address in the corner, and it was still sealed. Still sealed because a sealed envelope carries the post office's own date and nobody can claim anyone altered it. My lawyer would not let me open the thing. A clerk opened it in a room with a camera running and both sides watching. The postmark on it was the 4th of June 2009. Inside was a warranty deed signed on the 2nd of June 2009, notarized by the woman with the bin in her garage and matching her entry 1161. It named the same house and the same son. It had been about 14 feet from where I slept for most of a decade. The court did not have to decide whether my father meant well. It only had to decide whether he let go, and a man who puts a deed in the mail has let go. The ruling came 9 years and 4 months after a stranger read me that inventory. It ran 11 pages, and 9 of them were about the presumption. Because that was the whole fight. The vault copy did still carry the presumption against delivery, and they argued that one presumption should poison both documents. The court said no. Presumption attaches to a document, not to a man. Keeping one copy in a drawer says nothing at all about what he did with another. You cannot take a deed back by keeping a different one in a drawer. Once title moves, it has moved, and the only thing that moves it again is another signature. Title had passed in June of 2009. Everything that happened after that was paperwork about a house my father did not own anymore. I do not want to turn his second wife into a villain, because I do not believe she was one. A woman named Ruth believed that house was hers because he told her it was. He never told her about 2009. He never told me all of it either, and that silence is what I keep turning over at night. And there was still the question I had been carrying since a stranger read me a checkbook. Why would a man who mailed a deed refuse to spend $40 to record it? I found the answer in his own handwriting, in the same shoebox, on the back of the notary's second receipt. Recording that deed in 2009 would have triggered a county transfer tax on a house assessed at $268,000. The bill for it would have come to about $3,200. He did not have $3,200 in the spring of 2009. He had just buried my mother, and he still owed about $41,000 on the mortgage. So he did the one thing that cost him nothing at all. He delivered it. He was going to record it as soon as he had the money. He wrote a figure on the back of that receipt and he underlined it twice. He died 7 years later with about $2,900 in a checking account, which was roughly $300 short of the tax he had been saving for. The county recorded that deed 16 years late. A clerk charged me $40 and handed me a receipt without looking up. I moved back upstairs on a Thursday in March. The couple in my rooms had 60 days by law, and I told them to take 90 because none of it had ever been their doing. My father never lost that house and he never gave it away. He just could not afford to tell the county what he had already done, and it took me 9 years to say it for him.